Good evening, and welcome to Spelman College's 6th virtual town hall with our president, Dr. Mary Schmidt-Campbell. The topic this evening is Scenarios for Fall 2021, the Future of Spelman College. I'm Jesse Brooks, Vice President of Institution Advancement. Before we hear from our president, let me remind you that this town hall is 1 hour, from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. We invite you to ask questions during the session. You can do so by clicking on the Q&A function on your Zoom page. The president will try to answer questions in the course of her presentation, and there will be time at the end of her presentation for her to answer additional questions. Answers to questions we do not get to this evening will be posted on our FAQ page on the spelman.edu website. Tonight, we are joined by members of the college's senior leadership team. Let me introduce all of the panelists. Sharon Davies, Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs. Dawn Alston, Vice President and Chief Financial Officer. Myra Burnett, Vice President of Planning, Research, and Institutional Effectiveness. Ingrid Hayes, Vice President of Enrollment Management. John Wilson, Vice President and Chief Information Officer. Terry Reed, Vice President and Secretary of the College. Darrell Holloman, Vice President of Student Affairs, and Helga Greenfield, Chief of Staff to the President and Associate Vice President for Title III in Government Relations. It is now my pleasure to turn the session over to the 10th President of Spelman College, Dr. Mary Schmidt-Campbell.
Thank you, Jesse. Good evening. Tonight we have over 1,000 attendees. Many of you are parents, students, staff, and faculty. Welcome. I hope that everyone is doing well tonight. So, the semester has come to an end. We made it. And now our campus is hard at work, examining closely which option we'll choose for the fall semester. I know that everyone is waiting anxiously to hear from us. As members of the campus and our trustees examine each option, we're weighing very carefully the impact that choice will have on our students, faculty, and staff. We're guided by 3 major priorities. We're managing a public health crisis. So first and foremost, we want to ensure the health and safety of our students, faculty, and staff. Second, we want to maintain the high quality of the Spelman College academic program. And third, we want to enable the short and long-term financial sustainability of Spelman College. Let's go to the first slide. Our topics for tonight's town hall is to, first of all, to celebrate our seniors, our students, to highlight our staff and our faculty accomplishments. We've been through a lot, and so we want to take a moment and pay tribute to everybody who made this last 6 weeks possible. Then I'd like to talk to you a little bit about this year's 2020 budget and the impact of COVID on that budget. Then move to the forms of student assistance that we've been able to provide, including emergency funds, funds distributed through the CARES Act, and refunds that we've been able to provide. Then I'd like to get to the work of the Spelman College Task Force on COVID-19 and let you share with you some of the options that we're considering and the potential impact of those options on our 2021 budget. And finally, I'd like to end with some strategic investments we're considering and our fundraising strategies. Next slide, please. Spelman Undaunted. That's what I would say of the class of 2020, the class of perfect vision. There were 483 students who graduated. 50 of them were inducted into Georgia's Epsilon chapter of Phi Beta Kappa Honor Society. Congratulations to all of you. Let me especially salute our valedictorian, Kendra Grissom. She represented Spelman exceedingly well on Good Morning America about a week ago, and she's off to Johns Hopkins to pursue a PhD in history. Let me salute also our salutatorian, Jasmine McClam, a Pickering Fellow She'll attend Columbia University, where she'll pursue a graduate degree in international affairs. And let me give a shout out to all of our graduating seniors. You're going on to great things, to Teach for America, to Harvard Law, jobs at Accenture and Microsoft, a fellowship with the Chicago Federal Reserve, Code 2040, the Alliance Theater, and many more exciting ventures. I also want to thank Spelman trustee Susan Dunn, who's provided access to career boosters for those seniors still looking. Be sure to get in touch with our career development office if you still need some help in your post-baccalaureate plans. Next slide, please. Some of you may have listened in on Saturday. We live streamed a salute to our seniors. Now, this is not our commencement. This was just our way of saying congratulations, because we're still planning an in-person ceremony at a time when we feel it's safe for the assembly of large groups. But in this live stream, every graduating senior is featured with her name, her photograph, and her major, and we invite you to enjoy it on YouTube. And to all of our students, we applaud you for staying with us. We know how hard it's been to focus, to establish a routine, to motivate yourself every day, and to get used to receiving your education online. But you did it, and you have the milestone of having completed another year as a Spelman sister, and we salute each and every one of you. Next slide, please. Now, most of our staff and faculty teleworked, and we thank you for your tenacity. It was through you that we were able to continue to run the college and do all the things we needed to do. And I want to extend a very special thanks to the staff who came to work every day. We had about 40 students who remained in the residence halls. So we had dining room staff, mail center, public safety, our ground staff, our maintenance crews, our cleaning staff, and our switchboard operators who came to work every day, keeping the campus running. Our hats off to you. Next slide, please. We also took time at our State of the College to salute some of our outstanding work on the part of individuals and entire divisions. And I'd just like to share with you the names of the people we honored, because I just want you to know how special our Spelman staff and faculty are. So let's start with our program coordinator for our honors program, Cynthia Cooke. Next slide, please. Cynthia was one of 2 winners of our Standard of Excellence Award. Congratulations to you, Cynthia. Next slide. Our second awardee was Daphne Faison, who is an executive assistant to the Vice President of Student Affairs. Congratulations, Daphne. Now, in addition to the 2 individuals, we also decided that we were going to salute 2 entire divisions, because we thought that throughout this year, these 2 divisions were asked to go even further and to do even more and go even further than all of the rest of us. And so I want a special hats off, next slide, to our entire division of communications. They've been handling our social media, our print and electronic media, all of these town halls, and they've managed crises and cybersecurity incidents and now COVID. So our special thanks to our Office of Communication. Next slide. In addition to communications, we also want to give a special shout out to our Spelman Technology Services. They're headed by our Chief Information Officer, John Wilson, and they have really been put to the test, not only with our modernization effort, which is still underway, but also monitoring our cybersecurity and the task of converting 800 courses from in-person to online in a week. So hats off to all of you, and thank you for everyone at Spelman College for everything that you do. Next slide. We also spend this semester reviewing the applications for promotion and tenure, and I just want to celebrate and congratulate all of the faculty who were promoted this year, starting with Dr. Lynn Maxwell, who's in the Department of English. She's a specialist in early English and Renaissance literature. Congratulations, Dr. Maxwell. Next slide. In the Department of History, and also chair of the Department of History, is Dr. Yan Zhu. She's a specialist in Chinese military history and gender issues in China. Congratulations, Dr. Zhu. Next slide. In the Department of Political Science, we congratulate Dr. Robert Brown, whose specialty is Black urban politics, healthcare disparities, and data analytics. Congratulations, Dr. Brown. In addition to these three faculty whom we welcome as permanent members of the Spelman community, I also want to take a moment to congratulate our faculty who were promoted to full professor. Next slide. I wish time permitted me to give you details about each and every one of these really exciting full professors. But I want you to know that each is committed not only to teaching, but to the development of effective pedagogical strategies. Each has a record of highly regarded and sustained research, and each has taken a leadership role on campus with their peers, in their professional organizations, and most importantly, in the success of their students and their development as leaders in their chosen fields. So congratulations, Dr. Naomi Campbell in the Department of Mathematics, Dr. Aditi Pai in the Department of Biology, Dr. Raquel Hill in the Department of Computer and Information Sciences, and also the chair of that department, Dr. Lisa Hibbert in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. Next slide, please. And in the Department of Art and Visual Culture, I'd like to congratulate Professor Meyer Green. In the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies, Dr. Nami Kim, who is also the chair of that department, Dr. Karen Bracke, who is in the Department of Psychology, and Dr. Kasahun Waldemariam, who's in the Department of Political Science. Next slide, please. Now, in addition to our tenure and promotion processes, at this time of year, we also like to take a moment to salute those faculty who have won presidential awards for their distinction in teaching, service, and mentoring. For our Vulcan Teaching Award, we congratulate Dr. Shania Cordes, an assistant professor in sociology and anthropology. Our Presidential Award for Scholarly Achievement has gone to Dr. Dongfang Wang, an associate professor in the Department of Biology. Next slide, please. And for our Distinguished Service Award, we congratulate Dr. VETA GOLER, associate professor in dance, performance, and choreography. And in mentoring, we salute Dr. Anastasia Valecci, associate professor in world languages and literature. Congratulations to you all. Let's go to the next slide. Now, that was all of our good news, and we are so grateful for all the accomplishments and achievements of our students and our faculty and our staff. But we all acknowledge that this was a very challenging year. And so let me bring you up to date on what has transpired this year and what our plans are for the coming academic year. Next slide. So for fiscal year 2020, you should know that as a result of our having to ask our students to vacate the residence halls and for us to transition from in-person to online, the college experienced a very severe revenue loss of close to $5 million. Next slide. This was a challenge for us in terms of meeting our fiscal year 2020 budget, but we implemented some very stringent budget reduction strategies. Our business and finance area has been monitoring our expenses very closely, and I am very pleased to announce that we will be ending the 2020 fiscal year with a balanced budget. And my thanks to everybody, every single person on this campus contributed to our being able to make those savings and to make those reductions. And we thank our very skilled business and finance staff for monitoring our spending along the way. Next slide. One of the tactics that we have put into place in order for us to be able to meet the end of the year with a balanced budget is to invite everybody on campus to take a mandatory vacation. So I'd like to take this occasion to let everybody know that starting with Memorial Day, everybody on the Spelman campus will be on vacation. So if you get a vacation message, just know that we'll be back the week after next. Thank you. Next slide, please. Even as we were dealing with our budgetary issues, of course, the COVID crisis had an additional impact on our students and our campus. And in our concern for our students, we launched a very, very vigorous fundraising campaign to establish an emergency fund. And I'm very pleased to report to you that that emergency fund continues to grow. We now have over $300,000 in the fund, 880 donors. We have dispersed over $200,000, as you can see from this chart. Those funds have gone to over 250 students who have received assistance. We've gotten 377 applications. We're still processing them and still going through new applications. So please, if you have needs, please make sure that we know of them, because we are still processing these requests. As you can see from the chart, most of the requests had to do with housing, with rent and utilities, with food, the next most urgent request, followed very closely by technology needs. But we are able, and we continue to be able to fulfill those requests. So we encourage you to continue to make them. Not only do we have those 200 students, over 200 students who have applied for the emergency funds, but this year, as I announced at an earlier town hall, we're able to provide 40 virtual data science internships. And I'm happy to report that we got over 200 applications for those internships. And I know that they are going to be chosen very soon. They come with a stipend of $3,500. I want to have a special thanks to Dr. Tiffany Oliver and Dr. Tasha Innes for taking a leadership role in setting up these internships, as well as the faculty who are participating, Dr. Jerry Volsey, Dr. Marionette Holmes, Dr. VETA GOLER, and all the other faculty who are participating, and to our Career Pathways Initiative, Dr. Pavri and Harold Bell, for providing support so that we were able to support our faculty and our students. Next slide, please. I want to give you a little bit of an update on the CARES Act. As many of you know, Spelman College received $2.8 million in the first allocation of funds. Half of that, $1.4 million, has been allocated for emergency student aid. We have notified over 1,000 students that they are eligible to receive this aid. And we know that over 1,000 have completed the certification that entitles them to receive the aid. And we are in the process right now of distributing those funds. The other half of those funds, the other half of $1.4 million, we are using to prorate a refund of fees. You received a message from Dawn Alston, our CFO, to announce that this was about to take place. And so you should all be receiving a portion of that refund in the mail very soon. That leaves us with another bucket of funds that came from the HBCU allocation, which we will use to mitigate the revenue loss for fiscal year 2021. And I'll speak a little bit more about that later in our town hall. So let's turn to fiscal year 2021. Next slide, please. In order for, can we go back to the slide on the task force? Thank you. Thank you. So let's talk about the future of Spelman, the fall 2021 task force. I have asked our provost, Sharon Davies, and our CFO, Dawn Alston, to co-chair a task force, the purpose of which would be to look at various scenarios that would govern the way that we were able to manage the 2021 that would govern the way that we're able to manage the 2021 academic options for the fall and beyond. So I'm going to call on the provost to take us through the composition of the task force, the working groups that have been divided up under the task force, the guiding principles, the various scenarios that we have under development, and the 2 scenarios that we have narrowed this down to and are beginning to consider very, very carefully, and we'll decide between one or another of the 2. So Sharon Provost Davies, may I ask you to take it over and present the work of our task force?
Yes, thank you, President Campbell. I'm happy to do that. So as you can see from the names on this list, we have drawn from the strength of our faculty and our staff and our students to help us assess the possibilities for reopening in the fall, given the concerns of the pandemic. Next slide, please. We broke up the task force into subgroups to take on and consider the many different aspects of this challenge ahead of us. One will focus on health and safety in the workplace and also our residence halls. Another focuses on student life and our community experience. Another is focused on instructional and research continuity. A fourth is focused on the budgets and operations implications for either returning in person or remaining online. And a final is our very important technology group headed by our CFO, John Wilson, and the incredible Blanche Bryant and the entire team of STS, who has been so critical to our ability to navigate this very big challenge posed by the pandemic. Next slide, please. The driving guideposts for our consideration of 4 options that the president put in front of the task force are 3. The first and foremost the president has mentioned is the health and safety of the Spelman community. We will keep that in mind as we do all of our work. The second is making sure that Spelman College continues to be able to deliver a high quality educational experience to our students. And finally, we will do the steps that are necessary to make sure that we preserve for the future Spelman's fiscal stability. Next slide, please. 4 scenarios were put before the task force by the president, and 3 of those consider the possibility of returning in one way or another to an in-person classes and residential experience on our campus. So the first assumes that things have improved significantly that would allow us to return to normal in our residence halls and in-person classes. The second option is to remain for the time being online exclusively because things have not improved significantly enough to safeguard the health and safety of our community. And the final 2 are hybrids of those first 2, meaning that some of our students might be online, some in person on our campus. Some of our faculty might be teaching in person, some might be teaching remotely. And the fourth option is also contemplates the possibility that some part of the semester might be online, while another part might be in person because of the improvement of the public health challenge. Next slide, please. The task force subgroups work very hard in looking at the current public health information. There are real challenges to that because, as everyone knows, it's an incredibly fluid situation with new data coming available every day. We are watching it very closely. We are also very aware of the special impact that the pandemic is having on the African American community, our key demographic. And so as we considered those things, all of the subgroups unanimously agreed that it's very unlikely that we will start the fall semester business as usual, all of our campus community back on our campus in person and in-person classes. We think it's much more likely, and have narrowed the 4 options to 2, that we would either remain online exclusively as we begin the fall semester and watch the conditions, hoping for improvement, or that things will have improved enough that we could contemplate having some of our campus community back on our campus while other portions remain online. That is a low density approach that would enable us to have instituted protocols that might include things like wearing masks, certainly physical distancing, hand hygiene, and other things that we will be working on across the rest of the summer as we think about the possibility of a low density presence on our campus community.
Thank you, Provost Davies. While you were speaking, we got a number of questions came in. The first of these, there were actually several questions that go back to an earlier issue, and that is the criteria for the CARES distribution. I'm going to ask our CFO, Dawn Alston, to share with us what the criteria for the CARES distribution was. I spoke about eligibility requirements. So either Dawn or Ingrid Hayes, if you could speak to that.
Sure, Dr. Campbell. And I will ask my colleague Ingrid to jump in if I miss anything. The criteria for the distribution of the CARES Act award was based on EFC. And so there were bands.
Dawn, can I ask you to say what EFC is?
Oh, sure, I'm sorry, expected family contribution.
Thank you.
And that number actually comes from the FAFSA. And it is related to the financial aid applications. So I'm going to ask Ingrid to jump in to talk from the perspective of financial aid and the criteria that we use to determine how the funds would be distributed.
Thank you. Ingrid?
Sure, thank you. So as Dawn has mentioned, we set a cap on students who will receive the CARES Act fund at an estimated family contribution of $30,000 or below, because we wanted to make sure that our neediest students were receiving assistance. And those criteria were set at the college, in addition to the federal requirements, which included that the students had to be a U.S. citizen, had to be eligible for federal financial aid, and also that they had to be in good standing within the federal financial aid system. So they had to be able to receive those funds. And so we are required under the conditions of the CARES Act to fully disclose all of those things. And so they will be posted on our website for anyone to see, or if you have follow-up questions, that information will be posted to the website.
Thank you. We also have questions that have come in about the timing. Back to you, Provost Davies, the timing of our announcement about which of the 2 scenarios that we will follow. And I'll take that question and say that we are scheduled to present to our Board of Trustees a recommendation for one or another of these scenarios. no later than mid-June. So we would be able to, presumably we should be able to announce at that time. There's another question that has come in that is related to timing, and that is, how will we decide which students would come to campus and which would not? That is all going to be part of the planning that is underway right now. Next slide, please. So one thing that we do know is that whichever scenario that we choose, we are going to have to continue to be in an environment in which we are going to have to continue to make very stringent budget cuts, because either one of these scenarios would represent a significant loss of revenue for Spelman College. Primarily from the lack of revenue that comes from our residence halls. So if we have a low density residence hall, we would probably have less of a loss than if we have exclusively online. And so the college has been, as we're going through the scenario planning, we're also looking at what the impact is going to be on our 2021 budget. And we all know that we're going to have to be prepared to make cuts in the academic program, in our operations, and in our personnel. Next slide. We are hopeful that there may be some additional COVID-19 relief. And we do plan to use some of the funds that we have already received to help us mitigate the impact on our budget in 2021. But there's some other possibilities that may come from CARES. Dawn, may I call on you to talk about some of the payroll protection or tax credits that might come through COVID-19 relief?
Sure, Dr. Campbell. We may benefit from the ability to actually defer our payment of payroll taxes over the next 2 years. That is under the CARES Act. Another possibility may be that if the newest bill passes the Senate, and it includes in it an increase to the number of employees that the college can have in order to benefit from dollars from the payroll protection program, then we may be eligible to also receive some funds from there. But of course, it depends on if this newest bill passes through the Senate.
Thank you. So keep those cards and letters going to your legislators, because there still may be additional funds in the CARES Act that can assist not only Spelman, but all colleges and universities for getting through this crisis. Next slide, please. Spelman is not only considering how we are going to have to reduce costs, which we will, but we're also considering where is it going to be possible for us to make strategic investments and begin to develop alternative sources of revenue. As many of you know, Spelman receives most of its funds from several sources. One is tuition. Almost half of our operating costs come from tuition. Another significant portion comes from room and board. Another significant portion comes from our endowment. We are very blessed. We have a healthy endowment, but the endowment has been battered by some of the recent market volatility. And we're also seeking now to find ways to find other sources of income that can supplement and subsidize Spelman's excellence. And so I'm going to now turn this portion of the program back to our provost and invite her to cover some of the plans that we have been making for developing online programming that would be available to audiences other than our degree granting Spelman College students. Provost Davies.
Yes, thank you, President Campbell. I'm happy to talk about this because this has actually been a project of the college that has been growing over the last couple of years, even before the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. The college has been thinking about ways that we might produce an alternative revenue source for Spelman that relies on a broader student population of online learners. And this idea, if you go to the next slide, please, would be essentially providing access to a Spelman educational experience and a Spelman credential to non-traditional online learners. Next slide, please. Those of you who have been studying at Spelman for the last couple of years know that we have been steadily increasing the number of summer online courses for our students. And this summer, we have had an explosion in the number of summer online courses that we are going to be able to offer. We have 48 faculty who are interested in working very hard in building incredible online courses for summer study. And we have an unprecedented number of our students who are registered for those. You can still register. We will have 3 different summer sessions, one on June 1st, another starting on June 15th, and another one in July that will allow our students to take courses, get ahead, make up for lost time if they have to. And so we will build on this platform that we have been creating in the fall and moving into the spring of 2021 by beginning to offer new online programming for a new audience. Next slide, please. One of the things that we have learned in our study of online learners is that 40% of one of the largest institutions that offer online programming, the Southern New Hampshire University, 40% of their online students are Black women. We also have learned that 59% of adults who are currently considering online courses are interested in courses, not necessarily degree programs like bachelor's degrees or master's degrees, but are interested in other kinds of credentials and even just the opportunity to take a course at an elite institution like Spelman College. Next slide, please. So if we look at our local population and consider our key demographic, we think that there is good reason to believe that investments in this area will allow us to create an alternative revenue source for Spelman that will help us support our traditional students in their quest for degrees. Next slide, please. So we have decided at the urging of President Campbell to accelerate the launch of an online program that we were preparing to begin to offer in fall of 2020. We are in close conversations with the chairs of our departments and our faculty who might be a part of that program that would launch as early as this August. To do it, it means that we will have to put some effort and investment in areas of marketing and a website development. And so we have talked to the Board of Trustees about that and gotten their sanction, and we are moving aggressively forward on that plan this summer. Next slide. Theme courses will be offered over the fall, but those will be able to be stacked with additional courses that are offered in spring of 2020 to our new online learners that could fall into, at least initially, these major areas. One related to education certification, another to minority health, which is obviously of great importance to our country today, another in the area of diversity and inclusion, and finally, from our economics department, focusing in the area of business, wealth building, and women's leadership. So those are our exciting ideas for the launch of this new online programming at Spelman College. President Campbell.
Thank you, Provost Davies. While you were speaking, we had a number of questions that came in about tuition. So I want to go back to our conversation about the two scenarios and what the tuition would be. So for all Spelman students, we have a tuition freeze for academic year 2021. It's for whatever option we choose, whatever we do, there will be no increase to tuition. If in fact we choose, and I should say, and for both of the choices, whether it is online or online hybrid, for a one-time consideration only, for that year, we would have a slight discount to those students who had to take their courses online. We don't have the exact amount by which it would be discounted, but we do know that it'll be discounted. And we've taken that into account in the budget assumptions as we planned our budgets for 2021. Next slide, please. And I want to end by saying that in addition to our developing the capacity for earned income, Spelman continues with a very, very vigorous fundraising effort. The slide you're looking at compares Spelman College's history in fundraising against the fundraising history of colleges and universities in general. Colleges and universities in general are the light blue. The dark blue bars have been Spelman College's progress. The latest reported here is 2018. If we extended that chart out to 2020, you would continue to see very good results for Spelman College against the sector which we're a part of. And I'm going to invite everybody to stay tuned because Thursday we're going to make a very exciting announcement about fundraising that will have a very direct impact on our students. So please know that we continue to be very active, and I wanted to give a special shout out to our alumni. Our alumni have been just extraordinary this year. The reason we had so many donors in our emergency fund is because so many of our alumni mobilized their sisters. They in turn mobilized for this reunion year. We had many reunioners who stepped up and offered to help. And so that has made a difference. And please know that we are exceedingly helpful to our alumni who have stepped up for Spelman College during this time. So that brings me to the end of my presentation, and I just want to assure everybody that our trustees and the entire Spelman community are pouring our energies and efforts into choosing the operation that's right for Spelman. That's right for making sure that our students, our faculty, and our staff stay healthy, and that is right for our being able to offer a high quality education. And that's right for making sure that Spelman is going to be sustained financially, not just through this crisis, but for the next 139 years. And so with that, I'm going to turn to the questions in the Q&A. Oh, first, I do have a clarification that has just come in from from Ingrid Hayes. Thank you, Ingrid. I believe there were, Ingrid, can you share with us how many students were notified of CARES funds who have not yet opened their emails?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Campbell. There are still 180 students who received emails directly to their Spelman email accounts who were notified that they are recipients of the CARES Act funds, but have not yet opened those emails. The email contains the link to the certification form that students must complete in order for us to complete the processing of the payments to them. And so it's really important that those students do that. I think there was also a question about whether or not others could receive the funds. And so I also wanted to clarify that the funds, the $1.4 million has already been allocated to about 1,400 students. As we've explained, there was a tiered approach based on the students' EFC. So there are no additional funds that would be distributed under the CARES Act to either returning students or to new incoming students, as that was a question that I saw that came through earlier.
Thank you. So there are questions about other Georgia colleges. I should say that as we're developing our options, we are paying close attention to Georgia colleges. We're certainly paying close attention to the colleges in the Atlanta University Center. The presidents meet once a week virtually because we are an academic consortium. And so it's important that even as we're developing our scenarios, that we pay close attention to others. We have checked in with Georgia State, with Oglethorpe, with Agnes Scott, with Georgia Tech. We stay in touch with those schools. So we are definitely doing this in consultation. This evening, I have a call with 16 other college presidents. We are in close consultation with each other. But I will say this. In the end, we have to make a decision that's right for Spelman and right for our community. And to make sure that whatever choice we make, we can ensure that we're doing everything we can to keep everybody in good health. I have a question about study abroad and the mandatory requirement for international students for the fall semester. Provost Davies, would you care to answer that question?
Yes, absolutely. So international study majors know that in a normal year, we would require study abroad for that major. But because of the pandemic, we have had to cancel college-sponsored international and domestic travel, and study abroad is not currently allowed. So students who are a major in either our languages department or international studies will not be required to study abroad. Obviously, this is an experience we want for our students. It's one of our pride points that approximately 77% of Spelman students, by the time they graduate, have had at least one study abroad experience. But we are in unprecedented times, and the health of our students is our #1 priority. So for the time being, until things improve, we will not be allowing study abroad travel.
Thank you. We had several questions that came in about receiving final grades for this spring 2020. When will those grades and credits be posted for in DegreeWorks? Provost Davies, do we have an answer?
Yes, the grades are coming in and they are in the process of being converted. That process would normally take place next week, but as a result of the mandatory vacation, we will complete that by no later than June 12th, I'm told by Dean P. And students will be able to see their grades on or before June 12th.
Thank you. Here's a question that came in about the low density option. And does that refer to low density for students living in the residence hall or classroom instruction? Low density would apply to every single space on campus. It would have to be low density in the residence halls. Dining hall service would have to be regulated, so the dining halls remained low density. Classroom interiors would probably have to be reorganized or redesigned to ensure low density. Pathways might have to be one way to make sure that we don't have congestion just walking around the campus. But we have to think about every aspect of campus life, because we know that maintaining physical distance is imperative in terms of managing the potential for infections, as is wearing a mask. That would also be mandatory. We would probably have to institute some form of screening. That screening would no doubt include taking your temperature. It would include testing, rapid response testing. It would have to include the ability to isolate students if in fact it was determined they were symptomatic. We'd have to set aside space for that. We may even want to consider oximeters, which are those little machines that go over your finger to measure the oxygenation in your blood. So there are many, many things that have to be considered, not only a long list of issues, but how we would administer those various practices. How would we keep records for them? And all of that, these are the things that we would have to think through as we're thinking through issues of low density. I'm asked which option seems most likely at this point, and I wish I could tell you, but it is because we have to think through all of the consequences of these decisions. I see in the questions many comments that say that online is not as effective as in person. So you might say, well, if there's so many practices and protocols that we have to think about low density, why don't we just stick with online? Well, as we think about online, we want to make sure that we have an online infrastructure that makes online education as effective as possible. So we are weighing all of that, and that's what this process of conversation and examination and looking at models. I see there are also a number of comments about what other colleges and universities are doing, and we welcome that input. We have been monitoring very closely the models of other colleges. We have a college right here within the Atlanta University Center, and that is Morehouse School of Medicine. Morehouse School of Medicine has been open now for about 2 weeks, and they will begin to have their students return to campus, and they have set up a pilot of testing, screening, contact tracing, quarantine procedures for their student body and for their workforce. So we are certainly going to take a look at them. And we will take a look at other colleges and universities that are setting up pilot projects. That's part of this process that we are investigating as well. I have a question that has come in about will the general public be offered the opportunity to take some of our classes just for their own edification, not as part of certificate or degree program, but just because the course will have a unique focus because it would center the experiences of Black women. Provost Davies, would you like to answer that?
Yes, I love the question. It's exactly what we want to happen, and it's exactly what we think will happen as Spelman College becomes known for its courses, looking outward to an external audience. and leveraging the Spelman brand. We think that there is something qualitatively different about the way that our faculty teach our classes and what it is that they choose to focus on that will become apparent in the courses that are stood up on this online programming. And we will welcome lifelong learners to take courses with us.
Thank you. And Provost Davies, we had a question about what the two options were again. Could you run us through those again from just
Yes.
very briefly?
Yes. One option is to remain the way that we ended our spring semester, and that is with all of our students taking courses online, all of our faculty teaching courses online, and the bulk of our employees at Spelman teleworking, working from home rather than taking risks of exposure by coming out into public. The second option is a hybrid that would contemplate some of our students, some of our faculty being on our campus, more of our staff being on our campus than is currently the case, and the remainder of our students taking their courses online.
Thank you. So I have a question from a staff person. Dawn, and I'm going to direct this question to you. During furloughs, how will health insurance coverage be continued?
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. During the furloughs, we do anticipate that your health insurance will continue as normal.
Thank you. So I have a concern that has come in about choice. And the question has to do with if a student wanted to choose, say we're going with the residential, low density residential option. If a student wanted to choose to come to campus or felt that campus was a safer place for them to be, would there be an option for a student to come onto campus? And I'm going to address that question and say, again, that's exactly the kind of question that we have to consider. Under what guidelines, what criteria are we going to establish the ability to be on campus? Will we say certain majors? Will we say a certain class, say the first year class? Will we say that if students choose or elect to be on campus, how will we make that decision? That is certainly something that we would have to clarify so that there would be real clarity about who is permitted to live on campus and who has to remain with the online option. We are coming very close to the end of our time. Ingrid Hayes, there is several questions that have come in about the in-person commencement date. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Campbell. We still have not secured a venue, and so therefore the date is still not available. So as soon as we continue to explore all of our local options and hope to have an answer for everyone in the next few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to do one last question. So how is it acceptable for Morehouse School of Medicine to go back and not Spelman College? So let me answer that for you very quickly. Morehouse School of Medicine has 500 students total. Spelman College has 2,000. So they are already a very low density place, and they have far fewer workers. Their students are not residential. They, in fact, across the street from Morehouse School of Medicine have apartments, which are individual apartments, not dormitory or residence hall living. And they are all medical professionals or training to be medical professionals, and their training is going to be explicitly, part of their training will explicitly be in the care of COVID-19 patients. So it is a very different environment as a medical school from a high density, high population undergraduate school. So we're still going to go through all of our careful considerations before we make a determination for Spelman. So we have come to the end of our time together. And as always, I so enjoy getting the feedback from you. Please keep your questions coming. We are preparing, continue to prepare our FAQs. And I want you to know that we are extremely optimistic about the future. We intend to have a viable and flexible plan for next semester, certainly in the next few weeks, and a business plan that enables us to become, not only to sustain Spelman, but to become an integral part of the country's recovery in the near term and the long term. So thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Be safe, be well, and keep the faith.